All right, welcome back, everyone. Thank you for coming. Happy morning, all that stuff. Okay, so I want to start off by dropping a little bit of a truth bomb on you, which is that in my career in tech, one of the things that I've learned most of all is that we will have an opportunity to choose a lot. We may not like what it is that we are choosing or what we have to choose between. We may not like why we're being asked to choose any of these things at all. And we certainly don't like the number of times we have to choose in a given period of time. Don't try to read it. It's an eye exam. All it says is shit changes all the time, right? Actually, one of my favorite parts of the beginning of the pandemic was the media always saying, it's the new normal. And I'm sitting there thinking, oh, you mean like, when everything that we knew gets thrown out the window and we have to come up with completely different ways of doing every aspect of our job? Yeah, in tech we know that. We have a word for it. It's called, oh, look, it's Tuesday, right? The sheer volume of opportunities to choose creates a number of challenges, but maybe none so much as the paralyzing fear that we might choose wrong. Which is the point of my talk today. Thank you for joining me as I look back across a lifetime of very poor technical choices that I've made. There we go. Or I also call this when you stare into the face of failure and success smiles back. We'll see. All right, my name's Leon Adato. Nothing on the slide matters. I'm a middle-aged white dude giving a talk at a conference. What else do you need to know? You can find me as Leon Adato on all social media, and I picked that picture to give you confidence that I know what the hell I'm talking about, right? Okay, that's not important. What's important is that you understand that this is an oyster talk. Now, what I mean by that is that I have 30 minutes. I cannot teach you anything in 30 minutes. In fact, in 30 minutes, about the only thing I'm going to be able to do is irritate you. Now, when an oyster gets irritated, it does one of two things. It creates a pearl, or it dies. It is my sincere hope that I do not irritate you to death, but you are forewarned. Instead, what I hope is that I give you just the grain of an idea that you will then layer over with your own ideas and experiences until what you have is something that is precious and valuable and deeply personal to you. All right, after 35 years in tech, the one thing that I've learned and what I want to share with you today right up front is that there is no such thing as a poor technical choice. I know because I've made some real doozies. And so I'd like you to join me today as we take a tour through the residence of my technical poor choice house of horrors. Okay, I take it back. There are a couple of poor technical choices. For example, there we go. Let's see, yeah, no backups. That's a bad technical choice. Just don't do that. Also, replicas, mirrors, RAID, SAN, those are not backups. They're also not disaster recovery strategies. Unsecured S3 buckets, bad technical choice. Move fast, break things, sure, in test, not in production, right? You do have a test environment, right? Like you have a separate one, not the one we call production. Trying to do it yourself. This is a bad technical choice. People sometimes think it's a bad personal choice. That myth, that idea of an engineer slaving away in their private workshop coming up with the solution to cold fusion is a myth. There is no Tony Stark. In fact, single engineers haven't created so much as a paperclip by themselves, let alone solving Fermat's theorem. So please, work as a group, share. Using Oracle for literally anything. Starting a land war in Asia. No, okay, I had to include that one. That's not a technical choice. Okay, we're going to start back in 1984 with the Cleveland Freenet. Now, this was a partnership between Case Western Reserve University, IBM, and AT&T. For some context, Case Western Reserve is a university that is not known at all for having any kind of technical program whatsoever. IBM, of course, is the most stodgy computer company on earth, and AT&T is the zombified remains of a telecom company that only exists because it wasn't legislated out of existence. What could go wrong? Surprisingly, they succeeded. They created a free public community computer system which did resemble the BBS software I installed on my dad's CompuWare PC and ran when he wasn't home until the second month when he got the phone bill and he made me stop that. Anyway, I spent a lot of time on Freenet, like a lot of time, for a few very good reasons. First of all, it was free, and I was 16. Second of all, you could reliably download UDU-encoded ASCII porn. Third, there was a 1-hour time limit, but if you became an administrator, a moderator on one of the boards, you didn't have a time limit at all. So I became a SIG op for the D&D SIG, because of course I did. I also became an operator on the word processing SIG and a few other ones. But my point is that was kind of wasted time, like hundreds and hundreds of hours that really went nowhere, right? Well, being a glorified message board, what you did on Freenet was that you posted messages in different areas and you sent notes to the 7 other people who had email addresses in 1984 or whatever it was. But to do that, you needed an editor. Now, on Freenet, you had 3 choices. One was Fred, which was an abomination of a homegrown solution that nobody ever used, or Emacs or VI. Now, completely randomly, I picked VI. And because I was 16, I didn't know any better, so I learned it like it was the most natural thing in the world, right? Like, you know, :WQ bang, that makes perfect sense. Of course it does. So I just learned it. Okay, fine. Well, fast forward to one of my first jobs. I was working desktop support in an engineering firm, and the Unix admin came down to the desktop support space, and he told us that there was this new system that he needed someone to help administer. And he was a Unix admin in the 80s, 90s. I mean, like, you know, he was grumpy and nasty. And, I don't know which of you boneheads is ever going to figure this out, and I have to teach it to you. And to do that, I have to teach you this utility that nobody ever understands. It's called VI. You know that scene in Jurassic Park, like the first one? That was me. The point is that if I hadn't wasted all that time on Freenet, I wouldn't have been set up for this career boost later on. By the way, the system that I got to administer was Bind version 8, also known as the first production version of what would eventually come to be known as DNS. There is no point in this talk where I tell you learning DNS is good. We're safe. It's always DNS, yeah. Okay, next example, WordPerfect. So my actual first job in tech was in training. I would sit in a room with a bunch of adults and teach them how to use WordStar or Lotus 123 or WordPerfect. And my boss thought it was a really good idea if I got certified. So I took 80 hours to take the WordPerfect certified resources exam. No, not 80 hours to study. It was 80 hours to take the test. Because back in my day, we used to certify 10 miles uphill both ways in the snow, and we liked it. I don't know. But looking back on that, like, was it worth it? I mean, obviously I did it for my job, but I could have picked something that had a little bit of longer shelf life. I mean, 10 years later, now where's WordPerfect? 10 years ago, where was WordPerfect, right? Well, at the time, WordPerfect had made the fairly revolutionary decision not to put formatting codes in with the text. Instead, they would show you a representation of what bold or italic or whatever would look like. But sometimes you still needed to troubleshoot formatting codes if the codes were overlapping. And so they gave you a function called reveal codes. Now I want you to look at that very carefully, because you can see where the bold starts and stops. You can see where the underline starts and stops. You can see where the indents or the right justification, you can see all that, right? And so it should make sense why, a few years later, it took me exactly 35 seconds to understand how HTML worked. I'd been looking at it for years. And HTML helped me out in a lot of ways that I'll talk about in a little bit. Let me keep going. Like you, my browser has 8,972 tabs open at any given moment, but back in the day before the internet, what did you do? Well, I read voraciously, and I was really excited about technology. So any magazine I could get my hands on, I would get, and I would photocopy the pages, and I would rip them out, and I would fold the pages over. And I had my IT technical news scrapbook, and I had an IT news murder board. And the worst part was I wanted to talk to other people about this stuff. I would literally start conversations. Hey, did you hear how Borland is trying to take over the LIMS standard? I was so much fun at parties. I really wanted to share what I knew. Well, that Unix admin, who had taken pity on me because I knew VI, knew I knew VI and knew I knew HTML, and so he set up a web server. And so now I could take all those articles that I was cutting and pasting, and I would type them out. Yeah, I would retype them because I'm a masochist. I would type them out and put in the HTML codes and build web pages week by week by week, and I would share them with literally nobody read those pages. Not a single person. But I was out of work a few years later. I'll tell you about that in a minute. And the ability to build web pages and create websites was the only thing that let me put food on the table. So was it wasted time or not? Now, back when I was doing this stuff, doing all the HTML was kind of tedious, right? I mean, you have to put the header, and you have to do this and this and this. It was over and over and over again. So after a few weeks, I was trying to find a template or something I could do, and the Unix admin said, well, you could automate it. I'm like, you can? He said, yeah, let me show you. And he showed me just enough Perl to be dangerous. I created ridiculously complicated scripts that would take the raw text and it would smash it together and put the HTML codes, and then it would figure out what the next file name in the directory was supposed to be, and then it would call the file name, and then it would open up the index file and it would put in that. I was so proud of what I had done, but again, nobody was reading it, so why did I spend that time? Okay, it was my first programming language. That's nice. It was also Perl. Somebody the other day told me it was the world's only read-only language. So, okay, what good was it? In my career doing monitoring, which is about 25 years, I've used a lot of tools. I've used OpenView, BMC Patrol, Nagios, Shinken, SolarWinds, New Relic, of course. Okay, but I got my start with Tivoli. That was my first tool. For the time, Tivoli was a comprehensive, multi-million-dollar monitoring solution. It had modules for storage, for systems inventory, for software distribution, for metrics collection, for event correlation. It was also basically 5 Perl scripts in a trench coat with one binary. That was it. And those Perl scripts would grab the data and it would fling it to this Corba backend. Nobody with an ounce of common sense wanted anything to do with this. But of course, I heard Perl, and I'm like, yeah, sign me up. This sounds like fun, right? And because, just like when I was 16 learning VI, I was too new to understand how truly horrific the entire system was. So I just soaked it up. But in reality, a lot of what I did in that moment set me up for the next 25 years of my career. Now, Tivoli was good at a lot of things. Monitoring Windows systems was not one of them. So we decided we were going to get this weird third-party utility called SMS. This is before that happened. It was just a third-party utility. And we tried to integrate it. Now, at the time, integrating systems was difficult, but I'm telling you, Tivoli actively resisted any opportunity. It didn't want to do it. We spent months trying to make this weird third-party thing put metrics into the Tivoli database. In reality, we should have given up. I mean, it was way too much work for way too little. We should have stayed in the ecosystem. But having done that, I learned a lot about data transformation, integration, and a lot of stuff that I use even today when I'm working with New Relic customers. So, was it wasted time or not? By the way, if you're wondering, yes, that SMS utility got bought by Microsoft. It became Microsoft SMS, which then became SCCM, which then became SCOM, which then became ECM, which then became whatever the hell they're calling it this week. Okay, Tivoli had a GUI. It was a Java GUI, but okay, whatever. It was a GUI, and it would let you do things like when you're doing systems distribution, software distribution, you could group systems together, and then you could group the groups, and then you could group the group. Actually, you couldn't do that, because if you tried that, the entire thing would crash, the database would corrupt, and you'd have to either rebuild it completely from scratch, taking hours, or restoring it from backup, which also took hours. Why? You remember that Corba backend I talked about? Corba actually was the first object-aware database system in the industry, which is really cool. But they had only designed it with 3 layers of containership total. If you tried to do more than 3 layers of nested containership, it would just corrupt the whole damn thing. And after the 3rd weekend I spent rebuilding the database, it occurred to me that I learned a lot about maybe the downstream consequences of upstream architectural choices. Now, Corba wasn't my bad technical choice, right? But I also learned that knowing the pedigree of the software you're implementing, understanding the full architecture, even if you don't intend to change it or do it, that's kind of important. The work I did with Tivoli got me noticed in the company, and they offered me what seemed to be the chance of a lifetime. They were going to move me and my family overseas to the world headquarters, and then I would get to work on a really big project, monitoring for 250,000 systems in 5,000 locations across the globe. So they packed us all up, we sold our house, and we landed in Switzerland on September 1st, 2001, 10 days before 9/11. It was also 6 months, almost to the day, before the dot-com bubble burst, at which point they closed all projects, laid off a bunch of staff, sent us all home, and dropped us back in America in the middle of a recession. And I was out of work for 18 months. Of all the bad technical choices that I'm going to share with you today, this is the one that really had me thinking that I'd made this one choice that ruined everything. And in that moment, in those moments, I learned a little bit about humility. I learned a lot about myself. I learned about mental health. I learned about how to see myself as a person, not just a source of a paycheck. I learned about who my friends were and who I could rely on. And I learned that even when times are very, very tight, there are moments of joy, and you have to recognize them. It's really important. Okay, a little bit of a Tivoli palate cleanser. This is not Tivoli, and it wasn't even me. I was a voyeur of this bad technical choice. What happened was, there were two Sev1 incidents that were about a week apart. They both involved a config change in production. Remember we said move fast, break things in test, not in production. Well, they didn't listen. And one person was immediately walked out the door, and the other person was basically given a slap on the wrist. So what was different? Well, and it's not necessarily in that order. Well, one person made the config change, realized that everything had blown up, immediately flagged it to the team, owned up to it, and they didn't have the experience or the access to be able to change any of it, but they said, I'm going to be on this Sev1 call morning, noon, and night until this is fixed. I will bring you coffee. I will do whatever. Not just as a form of penance, but also because they understood that this is how they were going to find out how to grow in their career. Like, they're going to learn some skills on how to troubleshoot stuff, and that was, and you know, it was just being a good person. The other person tried to bury it, tried to hide it. Well, there's logs for everything, right? And then they were walked out the door. So there's a bunch of lessons to this, right? I mean, one is don't try to hide things because we're going to find it anyway. That's the obvious one. But I think that another lesson we can take away from this is that there isn't, or shouldn't be, an expectation of perfection in what we do. We are going to make mistakes. That's okay. There is also, or should be, an expectation of decency. And if we embrace that, our careers grow, and we have opportunities even through mistakes, even through when we think that we've made a resume-generating event. Okay, a few years ago, I was tweaking an alert in a different software package, not Tivoli, and I accidentally cut 772 tickets. Twice, in 15 minutes. The worst part was I didn't even know that I had cut the tickets, at least until the entire NOC team, the help desk, they came up to my cubicle and they invited me down to their area to close the 1,544 tickets for them. So with, you know, time, some counseling, a little bit of alcohol, I'm able to reflect back on that formative moment and ask myself what really went wrong. I mean, like, you know, was it the software to blame? Was it the operator? I think there's enough blame to go around. Part of it is that it was an immature philosophy about what alerts are and what they're supposed to do. But that is actually a talk for a completely different day. Here today, the lesson is that screen right there because it didn't exist. If it had existed, I probably wouldn't have done that. And in fact, when I became a DevRel advocate for that vendor, I immediately told them about this story. I told it with passion, and I told it with data. And I kept telling it over and over again until they built me that screen. And it has become one of the most beloved parts of the application because it has saved people hours and hours of closing 1,544 tickets for the NOC team and, you know, other mistakes like that. So again, poor technical choice, but if I hadn't had it, I wouldn't have been able to articulate that quite as well. As I said at the beginning, the sheer number of choices and of possible negative outcomes can be paralyzing. It is a Whitman sampler of potential crappy things that might occur. Like, for example, maybe doing Kubernetes is the wrong choice. Maybe not doing Kubernetes is the wrong choice. Or ChatGPT, or blockchain, or using this framework, or that language, or that platform, or AWS, or Azure, or GCP. Using Oracle for literally anything is a bad choice, but I had to put it up there. On-prem, or colo, or cloud native, or a hybrid mix of all of those. Monitoring with this solution, monitoring with that solution, monitoring with all the solutions at the same time, or building your own monitoring solution. These are all things that can feel paralyzing, and not just because, oh, I might get it wrong, but also if I don't do it, I'm going to miss out. I'm going to get left behind. Seth Godin, one of my heroes, addressed this and this inherent fear that we have of getting left behind. It's like technical FOMO, right? And he said, the fear of not getting onto the next thing causes us to hesitate and to get involved in something now. And his point is that the thing we have now is worth working with because it offers so many opportunities compared with just waiting for the next thing. So the lesson here is, embrace it. If you've got something in front of you, do it. Don't worry about whether it's going to be a poor technical choice down the road. I know I said that my point was that there are no poor technical choices, and yet, can it really be that banal, that predictable? Maybe the real treasure was the cables we collected along the way. It might be something else too. So one more example. My misspent youth. The word loquacious means tending to talk a great deal. I learned that word in 3rd grade when it appeared on my report card because that's what my teacher used to describe me. It appeared in 3 more grades after that, along with terms overly communicative, oversharing, and my personal favorite, diarrhea of the mouth. I talked a lot. I also wrote a lot. Like, if you wanted to know who made the funny fart noise at 11:15 in social studies class, my notes would have that. You might not get the details on the War of 1812, but my notes were nevertheless comprehensive in their own particular way. And also, from the time I was 10 years old until I graduated from university with a degree in drama, I pursued wholeheartedly and 100% a career in theater. As you can tell, I am not doing theater right now. But even like my senior year of high school, I had 2 periods of academics and 7, more than the allowed amount, 7 periods of music, choir, drama, band. And yet, I'm not doing that. So what good was all that time I spent along the way? By the way, the other guy, that's Lee Unkrich. He's the director of Coco, director of Toy Story 3, really fun. So, waste of time, right? Well, I'd like you to think about my role as a developer relations advocate. What do you do in that role? There's all this stuff, right? And if you think back to what I've been talking about, it's kind of in there. Not only that, but you'll remember that my start in tech was as a trainer. What does a trainer do? A trainer is somebody who can very quickly create an empathic bond with a room full of strangers so that they trust him, who can present a lot of detailed information in a way that's interesting and engaging, who's willing to take a technical pie in the face just to make things light and have fun with things, right? The writing that I did certainly has served me in the blogging circuit, and the theater degree, it's helped me to feel a little bit more comfortable speaking to you all today, right? So I'm not sure that it's completely a waste of time. There really aren't any poor technical choices because it's not about the tech. It was never about the tech. It will always be about you. What do I mean by that? I've left this slide intentionally blank to make room for you in the story. As we go through our careers, as we go through our technical journeys, we are going to pick up puzzle pieces that don't seem to have anywhere to go. They do not fit. And I'm here to tell you that everything you pick up will fit somewhere eventually. There is no part of your skills, your experience, your life that won't apply at some point. The trick, the lesson, is that we have to commit ourselves to showing up every day, ready to apply what we know and who we are. And if we do that, there will be no poor technical choices. Thank you very much. There's a couple of minutes for questions if you want to. I'm not sure, like, you want to say, like, no, really, Perl was a bad choice. Like, you know, if you want to, but if you have anything you want to ask, that's totally cool. I'm happy to answer anything you got.
Tell us about Oracle.
Tell you what?
Tell us about Oracle. What
Oracle?
happened?
Yeah, tell me where Oracle hurt you. Show me on the database where Oracle.
I'm pretty sure.
You know, it's an easy target. Yeah.
I'm not going to ask a question, but this talk deserves to be on TEDx. Are you planning to do it somewhere else?
Thank you. This is the first, thank you. So this is the first time I presented this talk, so I'm happy. I love attention. So I'm happy to show up anywhere and do this. It's just fine. It's also, like, as a DevRel advocate, it's kind of in the job description.
So you seem to have connected the dots well. You just specified about your misspent youth and then how you have connected that in the present moment or in the recent past, I would say, in your tech world or in your work. So were there any moment of realization where you thought that whatever you did in the past has really helped you in the present that you want to share us?
The last part, the whatever I did in the past, what?
Yeah, so you mentioned about your misspent youth. You seem to have connected your dots well in the present or in the recent past. So do you want to share any moment of realization with us?
So a moment of realization where I realized that everything wasn't wasted, honestly, was when I've been a developer relations advocate for 8 years. And when I got that first job, 2014, I became a, they called it a head geek for SolarWinds. And I took the job just for the title, man. Like, why not? Right? And I want like 8,000 business cards just so I can plaster my wall with it. And when I showed up on the first day and we were going to do a video, and like it's, you know, doing a video, and I had not done a lot of public speaking prior to that, and I'm like, wait a minute, wait. You're going to pay me to write, and you're going to pay me to get on camera, and you're going to pay me, you know I do this for free, right? And my wife was like, shut up, right? So, but in that moment when I was starting to do all these things, all the pieces sort of clicked together, and I'm like, oh, there's a place for me. And actually, it's an interesting point. There's a wonderful YouTube video that's going around lately about he's a musician. I can't remember his name right now, I'm sorry. And he's talking about wrong notes. And he says, it's not wrong, you just lack conviction. If you're looking for the YouTube video, that's what you'll find, you lack conviction. But really what he says is, there are no wrong notes, they're just not in their proper context. That a chord that sounds wrong will sound right if you do something to it next or whatever. And I feel like we in our jobs also have that experience where we feel like I'm bad and I'm not doing it, when in fact, all it is that we aren't in our proper context. That in a different situation, that diary of the mouth and writing too much and being too interested in being up in front of people and talking, that, like, let's face it, that is not exactly the description of an IT person, right? And yet, in its proper context, it can be useful, if not powerful. Any other questions? Well, thank you again. This has been an absolute delight.
All right. Thank you so much. So I have one last question.
Okay.
Do you still use VI or Vim or NeoVim?
I do.
Excellent.
I absolutely. When I'm doing, like, I'll give the class Nano, but I'm in VI. I'm like, don't watch what I'm doing. This is, yeah, absolutely.
I should give my talk about language servers in NeoVim now.
Uh-huh.
It's all good. All right.